Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 16th of March 2022, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Great to see you. On tonight's show, RadioSport, it's far more than 5905, you know, with Kevan N4XL live from South Carolina in the USA. Who needs an expensive slide scanner? And we find out what on earth this is. We have had a few entries to this, but they're varied and there's not many of them. So if you think you know, have a good look now. Close look might give you the clues you need. And we'll read out your entry on BATC or Facebook when we get to the competition. But first, just to let you know really, we've got our committee meeting tomorrow night. Well, don't normally mention this, but tomorrow's special because of course we're going to now decide and make a plan based on all of the things, the feedback that you gave us on the survey and on the members forum a few weeks ago. Crucial and key to this, of course, will be planning exactly when we're going to start meeting again, both to discuss meetings at CNS and also events like International Marconi Day on the 23rd of April, and looking at things like the AGM, as well as considering training and Bright Sparks, all those things that have been really in hibernation for 2 years. So that's tomorrow night. We've got a committee meeting with all of us coming to that. We're actually meeting on Zoom just because it happens to be more practical and easy for us. The message to you is if you have anything specific you want to add, we've got quite a full agenda to be honest, but if there's anything specific you'd like us to consider or add, then please email me by 3 o'clock tomorrow, that's Thursday, and we'll include it as any other business item on the agenda. Another thing while we're talking about club matters is just to apologise again to those of you who didn't get a newsletter last weekend. I did send an updated one on Tuesday, which hopefully most of you received, and explained why for some reason, some ISPs, internet service providers, don't like emails sometimes. There's something in them they don't like, sometimes links, email addresses or whatever. But hopefully you got it all on Monday, or Tuesday rather, when we resent it. And the other thing to mention is that this week's newsletter, the one that will come out the weekend, is going to contain something extra because John G3XLL, following our survey where we asked people to contribute to things, he's written a lovely article on aeronautical and marine non-directional beacons of Europe, something he's passionate about, might well interest you as well. So it's really good. Look out for that. And of course, it's an advert for you as well. I occasionally do hear people say, "Oh, the newsletter is just full of contesting or remorse." Well, it's only that because those people write those articles. If you'd like to write an occasional article or even a regular article, come to that, but an article like John has done, then please, as long as it's vaguely related to radio or certainly technology, then we'll almost certainly carry it in the newsletter. We would love to share it with everybody else. If you're not sure, then drop me a note and we can talk about it and just see where. But we would love to carry other things other than those regular items that you see every week. Now on to this week's news, and that picture again that we showed at the top of the programme. Can we see it again, Tammy? This slide scanner. John M6JAU sent us this, and he says, "I was amused by the high-tech and expensive slide copier shown on last week's NARC show. But here is mine," and I love this bit, "built with a couple of toilet roll tubes and a little sellotape." And do you know what? That's me when I was about 8.
A bit of Blue Peter-ish.
I just love making things in those days, and cardboard and certainly toilet rolls were one of those staple things you needed. I drove my parents mad wanting both sellotape, which I got through a lot of, and batteries, I remember. Anyway, John also says that it just requires a sheet of white paper and then a camera with a macro setting. So he's got a fine pics there. So he's obviously set it to be fairly close to the slide, and then just a bit of white paper, I'm guessing, to sort of give it a smooth, translucent sort of screen to shine the light through onto the slide. But there we are. Julian, if you're still watching this, there's a really economic way that you could maybe make one yourself. I mean, this isn't made up just for this. This is something that seriously John uses already. So do have a look at that. Bob Fuller has actually put a note on Facebook and said it's no good for negatives, question mark, question mark. Well, I guess, Bob, that maybe if your software can sort it out and turn it back into a positive, maybe it's still good. I don't know. But anyway, it's enterprising. I love the look of it. And most of all, I love the use of toilet rolls and sellotape again. It just takes me back. Yeah. Thank you, John, for that. Next, I got a message from Kevan N4XL, and he says, I had a guy called Alwyn contact me at the weekend telling me that he has boxes of magazines from the 50s to the early 2000s. They're neat and in boxes, and he would love them to go to somewhere near rather than just put them in the skip. And he said, and Kevin told them that we'd advertise them on NARC Live. They are Radio Constructor, Practical Electronics, and Radcom. So you're going to get in all sorts of different projects and things there, especially if they go back from the 50s. There's about 1,000 magazines in total, about 8 boxes. Yeah, they belong to apparently to G8 NFO, which I looked and is not someone from this area. So I presume it may be a silent key sale or something like that. Anyway, I've got the contact details for Alwyn, who's got these magazines, and I've got a mobile number and an email address. Rather than publicise that to everybody, if you're interested in any of those magazines, then please just drop us a line. The usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com, and I'll put you in touch with him. By the way, these magazines are located in Lowestoft at the moment. There's the email address at the bottom of your screen now. But he's happy to meet someone locally if that helps. He just doesn't want to throw them away. So if you're interested in any of those magazines, Radio Constructor, Practical Electronics or Radcom, drop me a line to that address and we'll put you in touch. Now on to an exciting bit of video. If you're not too much into electronics, you may not know what I'm talking about, but those of you who've dabbled over the years, you'll know one of the things you've got to be very careful with an electrolytic capacitor is that you don't give it the too high voltage, you don't put the polarity around the wrong way. They're the two main things that you just mustn't ever do. If you do, it's well known in the electronics fraternity that you end up with a bit of an explosion. But have you ever seen one go? Well, Martin M4XL sent us this, and he thought it might be good for our fun section at the beginning of the show. This is about blowing up capacitors at, get this, 187,000 frames per second. We're going to show you a video now from YouTube. It's a team called the Slow Mo Guys. They've been around for several years. I know Kevin told us about it some time ago. They do lots of wonderful things. But let's have a look at this anyway. Thanks to Martin for sending this. And by the way, don't try this at home.
Hoping it's going to go.
All right, I've changed frame rate to 187,500 frames a second.
Bigger woof.
Okay, we have introduced a fan. Switch to the probe lens. We're very close up. Got a very bright light up front. It's wobbling all over the place. Well, in slow-mo it won't move.
Yeah, I know, right? You have to turn the voltage up higher on this one. Let me know when you're ready.
Ready.
Power on, voltage up. Whoa! Whoa! God!
What?
Bit of like flaming debris fell down under the table. Even though it's macro, this like it's so much smaller that it doesn't look the same. What the hell? What?
What happened there?
Jesus.
Look at this plasma.
Then there's like a flame here.
Let's go back to that swell. It like expanded at the bottom and then in the top it also went.
It like it was like a
it's
snake.
Like a ripple.
Like a like a ripple.
It it just exploded like a balloon. And then all of this gump.
Oh, that's what I saw falling to the ground on fire.
Look at that, you can see the blue in the flame. Okay, right, this is blowing out an exposure time of 2.6 microseconds.
Don't you think it looks like we're in space?
Yeah.
Like it looks like space. This is definitely what I saw falling to the floor when I was under the table. Look at the spinning piece of metal debris, like molten.
A little bit of lava.
Yeah.
All right, in order to calculate speed.
Pretty much exactly.
We better fade it there. I think we could watch that all the way through. It's quite a few minutes, isn't it, Tammy?
It's actually, where is it? Hold on, I can't see it very
11
well.
minutes, I think, or something like that. But we
12 minutes.
12 minutes. But there we are. That's a wonderful bit of video. I'm sure you'd agree. I like them. I rather thought it looked like something out of space. So
Go with slow-mo
I bet you've
guys.
never seen that sort of thing before. So that's what you've got to look for. YouTube, the slow-mo guys, just sort of search for that.
They actually blow up several, and quite a few at 80,000 frames per
Really?
second. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I had a quick look at the video earlier. So
Well,
well worth
that
looking
sounded
back
like
at.
they were doing it as well with a high voltage. But I'll leave you to look if you want to see more. Thanks again to Martin for letting us know about that. Really, really good stuff. And finally, from me at least, Nev, M0NFY. I always worry when I get an email from him. I don't know why that is. I just feel a bit anxious, but I'm sure it'll be all right. Anyway, I don't know if you watched the BBC programme Click, he says, but I saw something interesting at 13 minutes into this week's show, Scalpers it was called, during the segment fronted by LJ Rich. I've just taken and attached a screenshot from iPlayer. He says, particularly take a look at the left of the screen. No, it's
one of those radios.
It's one of those radios. Exactly what I was going to say. Oh, dear. Do you know what? Nev at the bottom of that. Do you know what he writes?
Sorry.
Yes. You've seen the script? Yes. He says, sorry, what have I... In fact, the heading of the email was, what have I started? Exactly. But there we are. That was on Click. But you saw it here first on NARC Live. Thank you very much, Nev, as always, for sending us that. Tammy, your little people.
Yep, here's the little people for this week. You see what it is? It's a typewriter.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and it's a
Pencil
pencil. Oh, it's a pencil sharpener. And, of course, the little bit of sharpened bit of wood coming out the top. It took me a little while there. I suppose I was more puzzled, but how did they get someone that small sitting on a tiny miniature chair? At least I assume it is. If that's a full-size pencil, imagine how small that is.
That's not a full-size pencil, is it? It's a full-size pencil sharpener.
Sharpener, okay.
So that's probably...
I'm overthinking it.
It's probably like O scale or something. I would have
Wonderful
thought.
stuff. From this Japanese website, miniature-calendar.com. New picture every day.
I want to know how they got a small person like you sitting there.
Oh, me? Oh, you think that was me? But he's slim.
He hasn't got any hair though, has he? So.
Thank you. Nor have I today. I like the haircut. Anyway, never mind. So what have you been doing? Don't forget to let us know. As always, radio@dcpmicro.com. We love to hear your news, things you see of interest like that slow-mo video. Brilliant sort of things to entertain and keep us together in these times. Radio@dcpmicro.com for anything to do with the shows at all and what you've been doing. Now round to that competition. We call it What on Earth Is This? And this is what we showed you last week. What on earth is this? Now, if you did look at it really closely, I think there were quite a few clues actually. And we had a real diverse interest. And before I reveal everybody else, I'm just going to have a look at that. We've got what people said.
We've got two
So
answers
we've
on
got Stuart M0JKB says possibly the interior of a jukebox. Ricardo says, is it the interior of a arcade amusement machine? Keep that thought. Anybody else, Tammy, on this?
I don't think so. We've had a comment about resistors, I think, here.
Right, we'll talk about that in a moment, Neil. I'll come back to you, but we'll do that after this. I'll come back to that. Okay, so let's have a look at those of you entered online. With an email to us. Steve G3VA says, it's a jukebox. Roy G8IXM, I was going to let you read this bit because I've got an awkward word here. I think this week's object is a form of praxinoscope or zoetrope or trope. I hope I've pronounced them right, Roy. It's a device that is spun and the user sees a rapid succession of sequenced images on the inner surface of the cylinder, producing the illusion of motion. If I say now something to you, Tammy, with your age and everything, you're going to understand what I say when I say, what the butler saw? Do you know what that is? What the butler saw?
No.
You're looking at me like straight. Okay. It's a machine anyway. It's a bit like that. They used to have them in the arcades in the old days.
Right, I don't know what that is.
John G0MXN says it looks like something from an arcade game. I don't think the wiring, though, is up to British standards. I haven't seen plugs like these in common use in the UK, and there might be a strong smell of burning insulation if switched on.
John 20TWQ said, I think this might be what we would call when I was a child a revolving magic lantern.
Yep, and I think he means that thing where you have animation, a bit like Roy was saying, I think.
Right.
Tom GXQD says he thinks it's the internal cabin of a carousel or fair ride. At the top there's a number of fluorescent light starters mounted on a board and what looks like some suppression on a mains connector. Behind there are some graphic impressions on clear panels depicting a 1950s style cafe and rock and roll dancing scene. Below there are metal weights and restraints with wooden boards for support of what is likely to be a rather gentle ride outside the enclosure. A couple of fluorescent tube connectors hanging down, suggesting a tube has fallen out. The whole contraption is for the illuminated centre of the ride. What a real detailed explanation of what he thinks there. And you?
Kevan N4XL, I think the pictured item is the inside of a coin pushing machine. I can see at least 4 fluorescent starters, and I think there are more in the background, which I would assume are to light the machine, as the tubes and control gear would be remote in something like that.
And, okay, so sort of generally around the fairgroundy
Yep,
type.
Steve Webb has said also he thinks it might be a lantern projector.
But the answer is...
It is, I can reveal, like a penny pusher or coin pusher.
A coin
like
pusher. They used to be
arcade.
called penny pushers when they were pennies, but it's a coin pusher. And it was sent to us by James M0UKS, who services and repairs this sort of thing for a living, as well as some of the more sophisticated machines now. And I think you can see there, if you look on the background, you can just see those images.
Yes,
the middle bit.
The middle bit. So you're actually looking right in the centre of that.
Yeah.
That's really
So
cool.
it got most of you going. I think Kevin's the only one who got it absolutely right. Several of you, though, suggested it might be the inside of an arcade music machine. Arcade amusement machine. But anyway, all of you entered. Thank you very much. Real sporting. All got it in the right thing. Fairground, the sort of thing you see on a fairground. But well done if you got it absolutely right as well. A penny pusher. Okay, so let's now have a look at a brand new item. What on earth is this? Or what on earth is this for? That's not unreasonable to say that. It's some kind of tooly gadgety thing, isn't it?
Sweden, in case anybody's wondering what that says.
Okay, Sweden. Is that the clue? That's the only clue.
It's not a clue, is it?
It's something specific. Well, no, that's probably where it's made, isn't it?
Yeah.
What on earth is that for? Some of you are going to know, I know, and some of you might be able to work it out. As always, send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com by 3 o'clock next Wednesday at the absolute latest. But if you know it now, send it now. Then you remember. That's the absolute latest to send it to us, though. Okay, now before we get on to the news, I will just read out what Neil has put here. Neil Bowers, this is. In 1976, I was on teaching practice as part of my teacher training. I was in the science prep room next to a lesson in progress. The power supply unit was lead-acid car batteries. I blew up a large electrolytic with a huge bang to reassure the class I was okay. Oh, I just missed that there. I entered... Oh,
Just jumping.
here we go. Sorry about this. To reassure the class I was okay, I entered the classroom followed by a cloud of shredded paper and smoke smelling of rotten fish.
Oh,
Do you know what? I remember that as well. That is what they smell like, bizarrely.
It's like electrical
I got
burn.
more respect after that incident. With a wink, he says. Well done. Thank you very much, Neil, for sharing that. I do remember when I've seen one blow up, and it's like foil and sort of looks a bit like fiberglass loft insulation sort of thing, that sort of thing, just everywhere from big capacitors anyway. But don't try it at home. This is not a suggestion that you do it. Okay, thank you very much for that. So just to let you know then what's happening at the club this coming week. So as I said, tomorrow night is for us, for the committee and officers, it's a committee meeting. On Sunday, it's the GB2RS News on GB3MB at 7 o'clock. On Monday at 7:30, the Monday Night Net with host Michael 2E0SZP, and at 8:30, the 80 metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And next Wednesday, here on NARC Live, 23rd of March that is, it's an In the Shack, which we've done before, but this is by special request by some of the newcomers, some of the new M7s that have joined. They really want to know a little bit more about propagation and propagation tools. So you may remember we've done them on antennas in the past, but this is about propagation and propagation tools. It's not a talk, it's an interactive. We really want you to join in, ideally on Zoom, and if you can't do that, you can join us on BATC or Facebook. And Jim G3YLA will be there to demonstrate PropQuest live, but lots of other things as well. And there'll be the idea of these interactives on In the Shack is for everybody to contribute and everybody to share and everybody to ask questions as well. So if you always want to know about propagation, which after all is a way of knowing exactly what's going to be happening in our hobby, both forecasts and looking back as well, then that's for you next week on NARC Live. And also, of course, keep sending your stories and your pictures and anything you've got as well for what on earth is this? We'd be pleased to receive them. And another reminder, as we always do, just that we've got this NARC card, which we're always happy to send to anybody you wish who would be cheered up, or maybe a celebration, maybe a sympathy version of this card we've also got for you. Just let us know and we'll be happy to send it to them. Add your name to ours. Thank you. So now it's round to our main event this evening. And as I said at the beginning, as we said in the newsletter as well, RadioSport contests, ironically actually, is a contest night tonight at 8 o'clock. It starts here. And RadioSport is much, much more than 5905. And with us is an old friend of the programme, Kevan N4XL, who's coming to us live from his home in South Carolina. So good evening to you, Kevan. We can't hear you at the moment. Is that us or you? Can't hear you, Kevan, at the moment. But we did have a few issues at the beginning. So we'll just come back to me for a moment. We're just going to have a look and see if we can get that back. Because we were talking to her, but we did have a couple of tech issues, which is why we were a couple of minutes late starting. Can you speak again for us, Kevan? Can't hear you.
I think it might be us.
Okay, so don't worry, Kevan, don't make any adjustments because we think it's something this end. So we've just had some, it's one of those very rare moments, in fact we don't think it's ever happened before, where the computer said no basically, and we've got quite a sophisticated little interface that we plug into the computer so that we can see Kevin's face and slides.
Can you speak, Kevan?
No, we can't hear him, but we did at the beginning. You can hear us, I take it. Can you, Kevin? Can you just put your thumbs up if you can hear us? Yeah, okay. Right, because we can see you here on the screen. Okay. I wish I hadn't done all that talking now.
I know.
We're talking. All right, sorry about this. I'm sure we'll join in though, all right. But we do have a bit of an issue with sound at the moment. And I won't interrupt Tammy because she's busy thinking about all the settings while I try and keep you company.
No, don't reconnect for a moment, Kevan, because I think it's us rather than you.
Okay, yeah, we're just getting some messages between us. We're on a one-to-one. If you wondered how this ever works, how we do this, we are using Zoom actually for this, but we're on a one-to-one link with Kevan in the States in this case. We just use it because Zoom is normally a really good way of making that connection. It's pretty universal. It's better than Skype and the sort of things that we used to use. And we have a special adapter. So we've got a fairly powerful MacBook here, which I'm looking at down below me, just to tell you what I'm looking at. And plugged into that is a special video adapter, which gives us 2 feeds from the Zoom call. This is what's fairly unique about it and why we like Zoom as well. It gives us both Kevin's picture of him, and it also gives us his slides as a separate video feed. And we plug both of those into a video mixer. Now we might, I'm guessing, have to restart. Do you think, Tammy?
Kevan, can you speak now?
It's not coming out here, is it? Can I just suggest, I'm sorry about this everybody, just checking that the volume is alright. What about restarting, do you think?
I think we're okay.
Okay, so...
Can you speak again, Kevan?
No.
I'm not sure it is us, to be honest. It may well be you. Do you wanna disconnect and then try reconnecting again?
And we'll restart as well.
Yeah.
Kevan, so sorry about this. It's South Carolina. It could be South Wyndham down the road, but we do have an issue. This is I don't think we've ever had anything quite like this before. But when we connected with Kevan at about 7:15 or so, there were some issues with video actually. So we restarted eventually to get it working again. So we're just having a look now. If you can talk to us, Kevan. No, we still can't hear you. Okay. There's not much I can do. Is there anything I can do to help, Tammy? Sorry about this, everybody. Again, if you have just joined us.
Right.
Hello, we've got Kevan,
okay.
as you can probably hear.
Hang on a sec.
Well done.
Hello.
We've just restarted basically everything. And we can hear you, Kevin, so don't adjust anything.
Right, can you speak now, Kevin? Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
That was working then.
It was.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can.
Yeah,
Right,
excellent.
I listened on an earpiece
Okay.
just to finish telling you at home how this all works. So then we put this into a video mixer and an audio mixer,
Hello.
of course. We can hear you, Kevin, fine. Anyway, I've given you a big build-up. I gave you one before, and I'll give you another build-up. It's all we're talking tonight about basically about radio sport, or often called contesting, at least in this country. And you're going to tell us that there's a lot more to it than just getting those 5905 points. So anyway, welcome. It's good to see you back.
I'm glad to be back. I'm not sure if one of the audio streams I have in a video is going to work, but we'll deal with that when we get to that point. And
All right. Well,
apologize for the problems.
We can hear you absolutely fine now. So I'll let you get back to your talk, and we'll certainly let you know if there's any problems. But otherwise, I'm sure it's all going to be fine. Thanks very much, Kevin. See you.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you for inviting me back. This talk today, a lot of people tend to roll their eyes when they hear about, oh, he's going to talk about contesting, but I'm not really going to talk so much about how to contest or what it is. This talk came about as a result of people saying, overhearing people say, well, what's so fun about saying 5'9" South Carolina or 5'9" which is your region over there in England 1,000 times over a weekend? And the answer is basically nothing. That's all there was. I never got into contesting, and it would have died out a long time ago. So I sat and I thought a little bit, and it occurred to me that perhaps people just don't know what goes on behind the scenes of a major contest effort. So I wanted to talk about some of the tools and things to get into it. What makes normal, intelligent people sit there and sound like an idiot when they talk and say the same thing over and over and over for an entire weekend? So with that, let's go ahead and see if I can get into this and get this thing going. Contesting is really a worldwide competition between thousands of people, and it's not fair. I mean, you have different propagation over there in England than I do here. There's different things even from station to station here in South Carolina. I've got different antennas. I've got different ground all around me. It's just inherently unfair everywhere around the world. We all try to compete. And one of the thrills is to figure out how to adapt and modify whatever plans you get in an attempt to maximize your score. It's not saying 5914 over and over. It's how do you prepare? How do you get ready? How do you adapt to the changes that are occurring? We're going to talk about propagation next week. And the propagation part of it is something that really drew me in, get a chance to see what happens around the world. You don't really have the same football we do over there. You've got what we call soccer here. But one of the things about a sport is there's a couple different levels of it. Here we've got just some people get together like a family picnic or something, and they decide to have a ball game with football. And people don't really know what they're doing. They're just getting out there and having a good time getting together. And if they enjoy it, they get into their what we call high school. I'm not sure what the equivalent over there is, but essentially 14, 15, 16-year-olds, you begin to learn there's a little bit more to it than just running around in a field at a family party. There are quite a few things you can do to improve and up the game and make it more interesting, and that draws a lot of people in. Then you get into the universities, and the competition level really starts going up. People get into it quite a bit. These, by the way, are two different teams. Orange there is for Clemson, South Carolina, and the Carolina one on the left with the man grabbing the ball, leaping in the air. Those are two big rivalries we have. And the game really gets up a lot when you get into the university level. And then, of course, you have the pro people who it's all about winning. That's where the money is. That's where you make very few mistakes, and you take it extremely seriously. I looked at contesting kind of the same way. We have non-contesters. They're just kind of drawn into it, dabble around a little bit, like, say, field day or something. You have casual contesters, which are award chasers or just trying to spend some time playing radio. You have investment in it. It's good to play around a little bit. That's progression that I made, field days, and I just kind of thought, well, let's jump in here and try to get my work all states or DXCC award. And then I got to thinking one day I can do a lot better at this. So I started actively working at getting better. Those are the serious type of people. And then the bug got me, became obsessed, and I started really trying to improve things. And a lot of people tend to follow this path. Many stop at level 2 or 3. It's essentially the same thing as the sports scope. That got to me. I started hearing RadioSport talked about a few years back, and I thought, how can you compare sitting at a radio to a sport? So I had to look it up in the dictionary. And when I did, I found out it's a source of diversion, recreation. Well, that is true about contesting. I decided I wouldn't explore B there. If you're interested, I'll let you explore that a little bit, the comparisons between that and radio. But it is a physical activity, which we do for pleasure. And you're going to ask yourself a minute, how is physical activity involved in sitting in a chair? Well, we're going to talk about that. Hopefully this audio stream will work. And it is a particular activity that everybody gets engaged in. So I guess in a way it does kind of fall under the definition of a sport. Now, how do we get into this physical conditioning part of it? Well, there is physical conditioning in it. This is a listing of the top scores for the 2018 CQ Worldwide DX contest. And if you look over there where the red box is, it says there's 48 hours of operating time for these people. 48 hours straight of sitting in the chair. That takes a little bit of physical stamina. You talk to some people who do that, they begin to talk about hallucinations, about how do they control their body and things as they start shaking a little bit during that time frame. When you look at it a little bit more, over that 48-hour period, they were doing 9,000 contacts. That's an average of one contact every 20 seconds for 48 hours. Your mind has to stay sharp. You have to follow what's going on. You have to deal with interruptions as things change. You have to address your station and the changing propagation, make decisions. And another interesting thing is this little column that says SO2R. That stands for Single Operator 2 Radio. You see all the top people in the world operate Single Operator 2 radio. And basically that means they have 2 radios going at the same time. Additionally, that meant you were calling CQ on one radio and using a second to find multipliers. But now they've even got it where you're calling CQ on 2 different bands and interleaving contacts back and forth. So you have to maintain the mental awareness over that 48-hour time frame to be able to interleave these contacts back and forth and continue to work. That does take a lot of physical conditioning. A lot of people talk about having to do exercise regimes, ride bicycles, and all kinds of things in their off time so that they can maintain the body physical characteristics of continuing to operate. If the audio stream works, we're going to listen to this man, N2NT, who's operating B47T Tango. And it was a very aggressive type of approach. And with that, let's see if this video works, if you can hear the audio. I'll interrupt it in a minute and I'll ask if you can hear it before I go on, because if you can't hear the audio, it doesn't mean anything. But if you do, there happens to be a YL here, and I didn't choose her particularly, or I'm not making fun of this operator. It's just I was going to show the difference in skill level between the 2 different people, a casual contester and somebody who's a professional, what I call a competitive contester. So let's see if this will work.
We can hear it.
Kilo 3, Delta November Alpha, and I need your information, please. QSO 2 Alpha, Winston, Pennsylvania. Have a good afternoon and evening out there. WA1, Echo Norway Ocean.
Kilo 8, Juliet Sierra Mike.
Juliet Foxtrot. Oh my goodness, I'm getting called by so many people here at once.
All right, so here's somebody who doesn't do a lot of time contesting. I think she was probably just drawn into it as part of a field day operation, which that's what this contest was. And she was carrying on contacts and working right along. But there's a couple things about it. When you're operating, this slide was for how to break a pileup. But when you're operating, the experience of the operator has a little bit to do with how pileups go. Inexperienced operators are overwhelmed by the wall of noise. In fact, she says that a little bit later. She says, "Oh my goodness, there are so many people calling me." And then she managed to pick one of them out. And if you're a tail ender, in other words, you wait till the big rush of calls go, and you wait until that quiet part comes, you can usually get through with an inexperienced operator. The experienced ones will pick out a partial call, they'll continue to do things, and it requires some different skills to bust those pileups. And here's an example of what a competitive contester sounds like. This guy is probably one of the best in the world for different things.
LM, thank you. This is Victor 47 Tango.
Victor Echo 3, Charlie Whiskey.
V37598.
Yeah, Victor Echo 3, Charlie Victor 5904.
Okay, thanks. This is the Oscar Whiskey 598.
Kilo 19 Oscar Whiskey 594.
K9OW, thanks.
K3LR.
K3LR 598.
Zero Charlie.
Thanks. 0 Charlie 598.
Kilowatt Quebec 0 Charlie 594.
KQ0 Charlie, thanks. Something with Bravo 598.
Alpha 3 Bravo.
A3B 598.
Thanks 595.
Thanks. Victor 47 Tango.
Imagine doing that for 48 hours. It takes a lot out of you, and there's a lot of skills employed with that. I do give a talk about how to bust a pileup, and I point out several of the things that he does that you tend to learn after you go for it. There's a thing called the World RadioSport Team Championship, which is they take the best operators from around the world, which I won't go into the selection process, but they have teams of 2, and they get out there and they compete. And starting in Boston a few years back in 2014, they actually went ahead and analyzed the terrain around it, and they tried to choose sites which were geographically the same to remove any type of advantage any particular location would have. They all have the same tower and antenna systems. That's all universal, so you can't claim there's any advantage to using a particular antenna over another. You can bring your own radios, but to put these 50 teams out there, and then they go ahead and compete, and they figure out who's the best in the world, just like an Olympic championship is. Jim George, W3BB, wrote a book about it, Contact Sport. If you're contesting geek, that's kind of an interesting read. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And it gives you a feel for what goes on behind the scenes at the WRTC Championship. The next one's going to be in Italy, by the way, and they postponed it because of COVID, but it's coming up this year, I think it is. So the question is, why become a serious contest? 5914 is not so much fun. What is going on with it? Well, you're going to talk a little bit about propagation. We're all interested in that. But firsthand, you get to see this stuff in real time. And you got thousands of people on the air around the world. It's easy to see what propagation is and how it changes. I can watch the spots. I use assisted operation, and I watch the spots of people coming in, and I hear them at the same time on my radio. You hear the aurora flutter, which is common. Another unusual thing that I heard one time is I was using a 270-foot horizontal loop. It was only 25 foot up. Yet all of a sudden I had an opening from here in South Carolina into a geographical area in France. And it went for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, working France station after French station after French station. And then it shifted to like Italy. And it stayed there for a period of time. And then it shifted up to the Northern European location. And it just geographically moved around from point to point. And it seemed to be there were thunderstorms in our area here and thunderstorms over in Europe at the same time. There was some kind of like trough between us and Europe, and it just redirected the radio signals down to small locations for a couple minutes, and then it just moved around. You get to hear gray line propagation and watch it march across and the spots and how they flow. And because a lot of people are familiar with those types of things, you know it's there, but then you actually get to see it by dozens of stations all of a sudden popping up on a gray line march across the continent. And those things are interesting to me. That's what drew me into it. You develop confidence in the ability to communicate in adverse conditions. A lot of the casual contesters, they're unable to pull people out of heavy QRM or QRN. And if there's a lot of problems, then they just give up and quit. Well, if you are doing emergency communications or something, those are the types of conditions you may find yourself in. And it's critical that you be able to communicate back and forth. So you learn those skills, how to work in not anything different than a 20 over S9 signal. You can pull them out when they're really weak. If you're in competition, which when I was over there in the Navy in Scotland, I used to play darts a lot over there, had a good time. And I know people do compete. And you get to compete while you're doing something that you love. Discover how to get the most from your radio, what all those buttons and knobs are, how they work, how they do it. And you can learn that as a BXer or just general learning. But again, when you put yourself in a situation where there are dozens and dozens of 20, 30, 40 over S9 signals, you learn how to adjust the radio to pull it out of those bad conditions. You also learn the importance of 1 dB. You say somebody, I'm going to make a 1 dB improvement in my shack. People say, well, it ain't worth the money. But if you make 4 or 5 of them, all of a sudden you've got a 4 or 5 or 6 dB improvement in your shack, and that is definitely worth the money. Those are the things that make the difference in whether you're a successful contester or not. And I like this. It satisfies the need to learn new things. I've learned more about how to set up a radio station and how to communicate with people around the world since becoming a contester than I ever had before. That's not to say you can't. A lot of people do learn to be very successful, but it's like a crash course in it. And you learn what's the important things and what aren't. The goal of a competitive contester is to win, at least in their local region or chosen category. And sometimes people are scared to jump in when they've got the people talking like V47T did a little bit ago. But competitive contesters need everybody. So jump on in there and make some contacts with people. We need you to help us get our scores. Awards chasers, casual contesters, they work with little or no preparation. But as you know, if you've been involved in a field day effort, sometimes serious competitive contesters, you got to learn a heck of a lot of information about it. And it takes time. You can't just jump in and become a successful contester. You learn about contest theory, improving your stations. It can't take weeks, months before the actual event occurs. Went to one of the contesting websites, and some of the things that are talked about, because you think contest theory, what are they talking about? It's more than just the actual, how do you make a contact? Here are some things I pulled off it when I made this up a couple years back. Sleep strategies before and during a contest. You can't bank sleep, but getting a good night's sleep 3 or 4 nights before a contest starts helps your body be in its best shape before you start. And it turns out that there are human bodies, most people have 90-minute sleep cycles. So rather than take a 20-minute nap, try to schedule your breaks so you do it in 90-minute increments. And that gives you the best bang for the buck and taking time off. How food and drink choices affect BIC, or what we call butt and chair time, because that's a successful tactic. The more time in the chair, the more your score will be, as a general thing. And sugars and caffeines, they can help you short term, but they can also cause a crash and end up forcing you to take more breaks and end up losing time in the chair because of those crashes that occur. I mentioned SO2R skills a minute ago. There's something out there called the reverse beacon network, which I'm sure you've talked about before. And there is an algorithm which the computer uses to tell if you're calling CQ or not. Tips for how to set up your CQ so you got the best chance of being spotted. Again, how to use your radio. The best headphones. A lot of people talk about that, whether they're contesters or not. But this is if you have hearing aids or cochlear implants, is what that is about. Contest tips specific for any particular motor operation. Remote station contesting, pros and cons, equipment that people have found that works very well for them. distributed contest teams around the area. You can set up teams and interface over the internet, share your logs back and forth. I've done that a couple times. And there are tips and tricks about how to record WAV files and set up for voice cams so you can save your voice over that 48-hour time frame. Mention a little about that in a minute. Contest preparations also include, of course, reading the rules. One thing about contesters is most of them, if they're serious or competitive, they'll have an annual station maintenance schedule set up. They want to make sure that they don't have their radio break down and Mr. Murphy come pay them a visit during the contest. They'll test their station operation days in advance, so if there's anything wrong, they got time to correct it before the test. There's a logging program called N1MM Plus, which most people around the world use. You want to update and test it before the contest. Set up any macros for optimizing your exchanges and calling CQs. Study logs from previous years. A lot of people post theirs online and lets other competitors look at them so you can figure out what did they do so successfully that they whooped me last year. Or you can go back and study your own and find out what mistakes you made. There's a thing called call history and super check partial files. We'll talk about them in a little bit. You want to make sure those are all up to date. And the bottom one's most important. Tammy would probably appreciate this. Make sure you have all your honeydews done and the chores taken care of so that you don't have to be interrupted during the contest. Propagation predictions, you can look at them ahead of time, definitely, which is a good thing to do. But also, there's the old tried and true methods, because the sun spins around and the sunspots go with it. 28 days ahead of a contest, go ahead and get on. The odds are maybe the conditions will be the same during your band. So you're planning out a major effort a month in advance there by doing that. And check the bands a few days leading up to a contest will help out. Decide your entry category. There's all kinds of ones. Multi-operator, single operator, high power, low power, using assistance, not doing a single band, QRP. Choose your entry category. Develop an operating strategy. You plan out, well, 10 meters was open at this particular time, these few days before the contest, so I'm going to try my best to get on 10 meters and work them when it's open. And you come up with a band plan, or when you plan on taking your breaks, things along those lines. And of course, strategies always have to change, but it's good to have it written down so that you know what you're planning on doing ahead of time. Purchase and prepare your food so you don't have to take time during the contest to go ahead and do that. My wife does things ahead of time for me normally, and I pick up a few things too and have snacks down here at the shack when I'm doing it. When you're calling CQ, a lot of times your transmitter will be keying every 3 seconds, and that'll heat up a rig in a very short period of time. So it's good to have a cooling fan behind it. And several times people have learned the lesson the hard way that Windows operating system does what it likes to do. And Murphy says that it's going to do an update right in the middle of your contest and screw you up. So try to set it so it doesn't update in the middle of the contest. Like any professional, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about competitive contesters, you have professional equipment and tools. They're critical. Antennas, of course. Everybody knows that antennas are the key more so than the radio in a lot of cases. But it's a good idea. A competitive contester will have more than one antenna for bands, so you can take advantage of different takeoff angles and know what the gain and null patterns are for each antenna. And receiving antenna will typically have negative gain, so you get a better signal to noise ratio. And you should have your antennas put up proper takeoff angles. My local club is going through that now. People are beginning to understand some of the importance of that. Some of the newer contesters have raised their antennas up and are seeing much better results. Logging program is essential. We'll talk about that tool in much more detail in a minute or two. And touch typing, if you don't have that skill, it's very, very useful. I'm going to go out on a limb and say just about every competitive winning contester out there is a touch typist. You can do well without it, but if you're switching back and forth between keyboard, you got to be a touch typist. And you need a competitive grade radio. again, most people say antennas are important, but competitive grade radio, once you get up in the upper levels, does make a big difference. There's a man called Rob Sherwood, NC0C, and he pushes a lot of this 2 kilohertz RMDR being very important. And that has a lot to do with how close you can get to another station without that other station interfering with you. And the higher that 2 kilohertz RMDR, the better off you are. ICOMs don't do as well normally with RMDR. There's another thing called noise to power ratio, though, that comes into play. And ICOMs are very good contest radios, despite them not normally appearing at the top of these lists. But RMDR is an important thing. CW, it's more critical. 90 dB is where you want to be as a minimum for RMDR. If you're in sideband, 80 dB is considered the lowest acceptable radio for that. I was able to use one time my radio died. I'm down here at the bottom now, TS590SG, but it had some problems. So I sent it off, and the man lent me a radio that was down here in this range. And he swore up and down that the radios were almost the same based on most of the specifications that he had seen. And he said, I've used it a lot, and I can work these stations around the world and everything. But taking a radio which isn't designed to be in a high RF environment like a major contest, if it isn't designed for that, and then putting in that major contest, it really makes a difference. You see the problem as it goes on back and forth. So I will never use a lower class radio again, because it just ruins the fun for me as we go through it. Let's see. I've got a presentation here. This is an ICOM propaganda film. And it's going to compare an ICOM, two different ICOM radios, so you can see what this RMDR does. So let's watch this just a minute. You don't have to know CW for this. Just listen to the signal and watch the band display. Sending CW, and they're going to put a carrier right on top of them and then move the carrier off frequency. .200 hertz off, you can't hear the other signal at all. One kilohertz away, you can finally begin hearing to see that that station. Finally, 20 kilohertz away, you get back to normal. And an ICOM 7800 is a good radio. This one just 200 hertz away and you can get good copy. So that's the difference between one of the top of the line radios that they have today and some of the earlier technology. And that's why many contesters, top contesters, spend the bucks to get these high dollar radios. Because if you take that first one, an ICOM 7800, which a lot of people use for contesting for years, but you put it in a high RF environment, and you can lose a lot of stations. You just don't hear them because of all the strong stations that are on the air. Logging program, N1MM is a professional tool. I think about last I heard, 55% of the people around the world are using it. It's free. And you look at this and you think, oh, there's a bit of stuff in there. I don't really know what it does. But for a contester, it has a tremendous amount of information packed into the screen. Remember, I was telling you that this is what competitive contesters do, some of the things that we look at, tools and things we play with. Up here, you've got the frequency, the RIT status, and what mode. In case it's a multi-mode contest, you can see what's going on. Here, this chart or portion of it tells you what the bands are. K4BAI, that's John over in Georgia. What this means is I have not worked Georgia on 100, or I have not worked him, K4BAI, on 160 meters on 20, 15, or 10. I have worked him already on 80 and 40. So it lets me at a glance know if I could move him to another band or not. I could say if I work him on 60, do you want to try 20 or something, which that might be a reach. This little check mark, what that means is the program has looked up K4BAI in a call history file, and it knows that John has been active in contests in the last 2 or 3 years. So if I'm having trouble copying a call, and I'm not sure I got the call right, that's an indication to me that, hey, I may have the call correct because this call has been in contests over the last 2 or 3 years. So it gives me an increased level of confidence that I've worked them. Here gives me the UTC time. Lets me know where I can take breaks or what the story is. A lot of things you use UTC for. These are macros. Just by hitting the F keys on a keyboard, I'll send these different messages. CQ, my exchange, thanks, Roger, Roger. I use the name Ken in the in the North American QSO party, so it says Ken, all those things. They just automatically will send them. And that can happen either on Morse code, or I can record WAV files, and it can use my actual voice to send those messages as well. And the orange one, there's a program here. For example, I've got K4BAI here. If I were to hit tab or space, and it would move over here to this next field, when I do that, this message will be sent automatically, whatever one's highlighted in orange. So that's part of another thing this tool does. Now down here at the bottom are the long and short path beam headings. If you think it might be the long path, you can spin your beam around. And in this case, it also lets me know that John was in this thing before, and I expect to get Georgia as a exchange of information out of him, what his name and his state is, and when their local and sunset time is, different things. That tells me how many contacts I've made and how many multipliers are there and what the score is for that current contest, all available. And so now I hit enter, and when I do, it would have sent my call. I was searching pounce, meaning I was answering his CQ. When I hit enter, it sent my call, and it automatically looked up his call in that call history file and populated John in Georgia, ready to log it. And if he comes back to me when I hit enter, it'll send my exchange, and then it'll go on from there. Very useful information. It also tells me that K4BAI in Georgia, these turned red. I have not worked Georgia on any of those 3 bands. So if I thought I might be able to get John, I could ask him, hey, would you want to move over to 20 meters and let me get you on there, which he might do for me because he's a friend of mine. The run messages and macros, you can set them up. There's all kinds of different things. So this way, this says, this is my WAV file. And at the same time, when it plays a CQ, it'll automatically clear any RIT that I have put in, because I may tune off frequency to tune a little bit of RIT to pick up some of these off frequency. I have a white thing which will clear out all the different fields. So there's all kinds of things you can use to set up for that. When you're talking, things want to sound normal. If you put some little couple 10-second delays, it just doesn't sound right. So a lot of times people record an audio file in their radio because they've got a voice cue in the radio, but you end up having these start and stop times at the beginning and the end of the thing, which can put delays in how fast your signal responds. So what I do a lot is I go ahead and I trim those things off. And if you also notice, this is at one level here, and it's a little bit louder there. I use a program called Audacity. I trim off those spaces, and I make all my wave files to be the same volume so that as I play them back, there isn't any variance in volume as you go back and forth, so it's not distracting. So that's another thing that competitive contesters do. In strategy, you got to read the rules and know how many things are, what contact is worth points. Each one's worth so many. Some of the contests say that the low bands, 160 through 40, you get more points for it than the other. Points could be based upon distance, using the grid locations in some contests. And other contests will get points. You can work them on different bands or modes. You get multipliers for them. Some contests say you work a station once, that's it, you can't work them anymore. Some contests have bonus stations in them. So not only do you get points for working, excuse me, the mode and the station, you get extra points for working them as a bonus station. And you're not penalized for working a dupe in 99% of the contests. It just slows people down. So competitive contesters don't like to work dupes, but just go ahead and work a dupe if you do. It saves the trouble of arguing whether you did before or not. Now, by knowing these types of things, you can begin to form your strategy. Hey, I want to spend as much time as I can on 160 through 40 and CW because that gives me the most points for every contact that I get. But by the same token, a lot of people may not know CW these days, and they may not lose the state may only be up on sideband. So I want to spend some time on sideband too. You begin to plot out some type of game plan to attack the contest. Different exchanges have different messages. 5-9 South Carolina, or for the ARLDX, for the QSO parties we have here to work different states. You usually send, if you're in state, you send your county. If you're out of state, you send your state or province. Or if you were to work, I've worked several English stations on QSO parties. We'd be logged as DX is what you would be. In the WPX contest, you use a serial number. In the Worldwide DX contest, you use that 595 or 5914 that's going on. And then the CW Sprint, which we have mostly here oriented North America, is most complex. You send his call, N6TR, then you send your call, K7GM, then you send a serial number, then you send your name, and then you send what state you're in. That's probably the most challenging contest that's out there. The thing about contests is there is no reset button. Again, it's a real-time competition. And unlike video games, you can't just hit a button and start all over because you're losing. You have to always be thinking about how to operate, get the best use out of your time. Use the operating band to maximize the points, and consider propagation. Will I have another chance to work the mults on this band? An example of that is here where I'm at, South Carolina, working the Caribbean. There's always a ton of stations trying to work the Caribbeans on a Saturday if it's a weekend-long contest. But on Sunday, a lot of times they're asking for people to work them because everybody's got hold of them Saturday. So if there's a big pile up on them on Saturday, I oftentimes will just skip them. I know the major contest station calls, and I'll say, oh, I'll get this person on Sunday, and I won't waste my time trying to bust the pile up on a Saturday. Or you can ask, will 10 meters be open like that 1700 Zulu like it was yesterday? Thinking about those types of things. When should I take a break? And I'm a low power station. When I was at a multi-multi NQ4i, I didn't have to worry so much. We had stacked monobanders and 1500 watts. We'd pretty much get through to whoever we wanted to, but as a low power station with a tri-bander at 50 feet or wire antennas, I got to ask, am I strong enough to get through this pile up, or am I wasting my time trying? Sometimes it's good to get the multiplier, but I could pick up a bunch of non-multiplier contacts, 5 or 6 of them, instead of wasting all my time trying to work on multiplier. I'll end up having a higher score at the end. Another thing is, beginning contesters a lot of time will say, I copy your, please copy mine. That sounds kind of polite, and it only takes a second, but most contesters, serious and competitive, don't like that. And this is part of the contester mindset. Here's why that comes into play and things to think about. It only takes a second to say, please copy my. Remember that guy at the beginning that he was working 9,000 contacts. If you waste 1 second over 9,000 contacts, you've wasted 150 minutes of your contest time that you can never get back. And if that guy was doing 3 contacts a minute, he had potentially 450 lost contacts simply because people were saying, please copy mine. If you only said it maybe 2 out of 10 times, you'd still lose about 100 contacts. And at the end of the contest, contact can easily be worth 1,000 points. So what that really means, losing 100 contacts at 1,000 points, you could lose 100,000 points simply by saying, please copy mine. So how you operate has a significant impact on your score. And that's just one little example. And many contests have won or lost by just a few contacts. Only send what's asked for. If somebody says, what's your class, or what's your call. You just say that. You don't say the whole thing like N4XL, 1 Echo, Sierra, Charlie. If he's asking my class, just say 1 Echo. Again, it's more efficient time-wise. And secondly, if you repeat your call when they're only asking for your class or what your serial number was, they may think they got your call wrong, and then you'll waste even more time trying to sort that out. So there's a thing that comes into play with that. As a competitive contester, I rely heavily a lot on the propagation tools, knowing what's going on. I like to play around a lot. I keep this up all the time so I know if there's any space weather, storm alerts or whatnot. And I like to play a lot with this thing, which is HamCap. And what this does is these lighter areas are showing places in the world that my signal is likely to be very strong based on prediction. And in this case, it's selected for 20 meters, and the time is at 2200 based on whatever A and K and SFI numbers that I put into the thing. And as this thing tracks along during the day, you get to see different parts of the world that should be open. And I found that, once I got it set up correctly, to be about 80% accurate. Used to automatically update. Now you got to change a few things on your own to keep this running. But I usually have that running. And many times, for example, this is showing, for example, Japan as being in a fairly light area. If I try shooting over this way, sometimes that doesn't happen. But this thing says it should have an opening. And if I change to a long path flow, I can many times get Japan or Australia, for example, showing a long path opening because this thing says it's there. So it keeps me aware that, hey, I might be able to pick up people as they go through the different periods of the weekend. Another thing N1MM has and many other tools are band maps and spectrum displays. I keep both these things open. This shows it was on 10 meters. This one shows it was on 20 meters. And in this case, these all represent the red and the blue calls that I haven't worked before and what frequency they're on. And red means they're a multiplier for me. Blue means I've already got that multiplier. I've already worked, that's one of the Russian stations. But I haven't worked him in particular. And I have worked this particular guy already. So you can tell at a glance where the new people are. And the thing about this is you can jump from place to place, spot to spot using a key on the keyboard. I can just hit a single button. It'll jump to this guy, and then it'll jump to that guy, and it'll jump to this guy. On the spectrum display, these two interact back and forth, and it feeds spots from here over to here. And in the case of RA6M, I've already worked him. He would not appear over here as a red dot on the spectrum display, so I don't have to waste time scanning across looking like it. It looks like there's a signal right there, but because there's no red dot below that signal, I haven't worked him yet. So besides jumping from spot to spot here, it'll skip over the ones I've worked. I can also jump from red dot to red dot, not knowing what station they are, except for I've told it to tell me up there, and pick up new stations as well. And that's the way as a search and pounce operator, I can get rates for 15 or 20 minutes, typically well over 100 contacts an hour just jumping from spot to spot. And I do that on a regular basis. A lot of times people say, well, spot's nothing more than a point and click. You click on it and away you go to that station, you put them in the log. Well, I downloaded this out of an actual contest. And here are 3 spots, RU1A, RA1A, and RM1A, all on the same frequency. Well, the real stations stand up. And if you know code, CW, those are all pretty similar. And the skimmers to mess that up, or somebody entered it incorrectly manually. So you can't trust it. Here's another example. On 7038, roughly, you've got 4 different stations, completely different, with one of them being a double mult. That's what green means, how I've got mine set up. So I might click on that spot thinking I'm working a double mult, put them in my log as W7RH, but if I didn't listen to the call, it was really SN2B, and when they did the log check, I'd not only lose the points for that, they'd say I wasn't in his log, and I'd end up getting penalized for not having it. And here's another example. This one's kind of interesting up here because KM3T has 2 different skimmers running. That's what the sharp means. And even though it's the same main station, each of his skimmers is picking up a different call. So you just can't really tell or assume that whatever spots are there correctly. You got to listen. Here's another tool we use a lot in N1MM spots. This is called the mult and Q window. These are stations spotted again. I can jump from spot to spot in here too. I have this set up by direction, and I point my beam like at 35 degrees, and then I jump from spot to spot within the bandwidth of my beam. Once I get down here, I'll spin the beam a little bit further and go on. Very useful tool to have. But this is the main thing I wanted to talk about in this. What this tells you is on 20 meters, I have 1 multiplier, and there are 25 contacts in the spots that have been put on there. And on 40, I've got 2 mults and 2 mults. And the red just means that's the highest number. So you can decide, do I want to go mult chasing on 40 and 80, or do I want to go contact chasing on 20? It helps you decide whether to make a band change or not. And as you look at this, you'd ask yourself, well, is this morning, meaning 80 and 40 are fading out and the day bands are coming up? If that's the case, I may very well want to go back and pick up these multipliers before I lose them. But on the other hand, if this is at nighttime, I might want to work these guys down before I start chasing mults on 40 and 80. So you can use that as a tool to help decide what to do. I've got a window for rate. Rate means how many stations you've worked for in a minute or an hour. The higher the rate, the more your score you're going to get, basically. And this thing tells you, it looks at your logs and how many you've logged in the last hour or so, or what your rate is, and it gives you a graphical representation of how you're doing. I mentioned before that jumping from spot to spot, I can do really good on search and pounce. When I was doing great, I found an open frequency, so I tried running. Well, my running rate dropped off, so I switched back over to search and pounce again. And for the last 10 contacts, I was working them at 190 an hour rate. That's what that green bar tells you. So it's very useful to figure out whether you want to keep trying to run, or whether you want to do search and pounce, or whether you should change bands, things along those lines. Again, we mentioned that chasing a mult versus getting several in the log is a decision you got to make. This was the final score of one of the contests I did. And when I was trying to decide whether to chase a mult or not, what this means is if I got that mult, it was the same as putting 3.6 Qs in the log. So if I had been chasing them and I was working at a 60 an hour rate, getting that 1 mult, if I'd have spent 4 minutes and been able to work 6 different contacts instead of chasing that mult, I'd have been much better off. Another tool to help. They have a thing called super check partial, which they call super check guess. And in this situation, what you end up doing is you type in a call, and the check mark means that that call has been used before, but so has OK1CF or OK1CLD or OH1C. So you can look at this super check partial if you're really having a trouble picking them out. Like you're not sure on that K, you can say, well, maybe I got the K wrong, glance up there and see that, well, it could be OH1C, or it could be old L1C, which I'd worked before. That's why he's grayed out. So it helps you guess what the story is. You still got to hear the score or the call and put it in there. Otherwise, your score may get penalized from it. But it helps you get the right thing. Operating skills. New standard phonetics are best because people sometimes just know enough English. They knew those phonetics. If you try using alternate things, they don't really get them. But by the same token, you want to know, it helps to know their numbers, some of their letters in their language if you can. Spanish works well, uno, dos, tres, or Japanese, ich, ni, san, shi. I'll shift over to them sometimes and we'll get through when they have troubles with them. It's also good to know different phonetics. You'll be happy to know that many Europeans, I've got an L in my call, that sometimes in bad conditions they have trouble with Lima. But if I switch to London, they just about always get that. The same token, Japanese get Tokyo very well. And Spanish people seem to get Santiago when Sierra doesn't get through. Those are some of the tricks that you learn with your competitive contest or how to get things through. And it helps to sound excited. Would you rather answer a CQ, or which makes you want to answer a CQ more? CQ contest, November 4, X-ray Lima. CQ contest, November 4, X-ray Lima. I want your contact, so I try to sound a little bit excited. Sometimes it works better to get a more laid-back approach. A lot of times, some people that are non-contesters get upset when they try to get their call through, and the other station after a couple times just says, I can't pull you out, try later, and starts calling CQ in your face again. But remember, they're in many cases trying to be competitive and win. And if they just don't think they can pull you out, they'll just try a couple times and then they'll move on, because rate is everything. They want to go ahead and get the highest score they can, and spending time trying to dig you out when it's so marginal copy slows them down too much. So don't be offended if they move on. They're trying to be competitive and win their categories. So bear with them on that. Another thing about knowing your rig, audio filter use. People know about using filters, but some rigs like the TS590, I can set the pass band of the filter. I'll set in the sideband, set the lower range at 500 and the upper range at 23 or 2500 hertz. And those higher frequencies typically on the sideband will help people pull it through better. And you can experiment with that a little bit as you play with it too. CW, just the opposite works. You can hear a 30 hertz difference in frequency, somebody a little bit off frequency, far better down at 400 hertz than you can at 800 hertz, because it's a bigger percentage of the main operating band. So you learn to differentiate between them. I like receive equalization, format pass works best for me. And there are things like audio peak filter and stuff too. Back to the contest mindset. Contesters know that from the moment they sit in the chair, every contact is important and your speed has to be maintained. This little chart shows you why. This is a hypothetical. I assume that 3 hours into the contest, I had 100 contacts and they were worth 3 points each. I'd had 10 zones in 30 countries, giving me 40 multipliers. 300 points times 40, I had a hypothetical score of 12,000 points. I got one more contact, it went up to 112, 120, only went up 120. I got that contact was a mult, it went up to 423. It was a double mult that went up to 726. Kind of hard to get excited about only a 120 point increase. Compare that to at the end of the contest, and this was an actual result as well. In that case, I had 1,081 contacts. And if I got just one more, instead of 120, that was worth almost 1,500 points. Much better. It's much easier to keep yourself excited at the end than it is at the beginning, because you see the big difference. And a double mult gives you 7,400 points. But the thing about that is it doesn't matter if it was this contact or the 10,082nd contact. If I took one out of here, whether it was the 100th or the 10,081st, my score would go down by about that much just as well. Doesn't matter where I took it out from, it'd go down. So it's important to keep pushing and driving. and trying to get contacts as fast as you can from the moment you sit down in the chair. Otherwise, if I hadn't got that 100th contact, I'd only had 1080 down there, and I'd have been 1,500 points shorter, even though it was had 3 hours into the contest. We have a thing called real-time scoreboard. A lot of people get into this. You can post your scores online while you're contesting and see how your competition's doing. Not everybody does it, but you start getting in races trying to chase, well, I'm here and I want to catch up to this guy, W1RM, so I got to really up my game to catch on. And you end up chasing people back and forth and help you stay motivated to keep your butt in chair. We have a thing called 3830 scores where everybody posts their scores so you can see how you do. You click on that. I'm not very good at it, but a lot of people keep track of, put notes in there. The band opened at this time. Propagation was poor because of this. So-and-so popped up on such a thing. And you can use that for developing your strategy for next year. Or you can look at your competition scores and see how they did back to back. One of the ways when I first started contesting, and I still do, is say, well, I got 1.8 million in that contest last year. Why don't I try to beat that score this year? And it helps keep you motivated and driving and pushing. Some people think you got to have fantastic stations. This is a friend of mine, Dave, WN4XL, and he was in the WPX contest in the low power 40 meter single band competition. He took #1 in North America. Well, that sounds really great. You must think Dave has a fantastic station. Dave was using a dipole, 40 meter dipole. I think he had it up. He's moved it around a little bit, but I think he had it up at that point at about 25 feet. And he took #1 in North America. So you can get some good wallpaper just by choosing the proper band. In this particular case, I was #3 in the U.S., #3 in North America, #16 in the world for a single operator assisted low power all band, which I think is doing pretty good. Again, all I have is a tri-bander at 50 feet, a vertical, and an inverted L. So you can do well with just reasonable type antennas to chase things. This is my SO2R station, which I'm having trouble with right now, but I just have the two TS590s and switch back and forth. I've got some band pass filters, and this is the thing to control automatic antenna switching. And I have a 2x8 antenna switch. And I just have a single antenna for my two radios. I've got a triplexer and the band pass filters. And what that does is I can have one of these radios selected to 15 and one to 10. And that triplexer keeps the two from affecting each other. And I can be transmitting all on both bands at the same time, but I just transmit with one at a time, alternate radios back and forth on the two bands without having any problems associated with my rig at all. And with the high commercial end equipment, I hardly get any interference at all and know the other station is running. So you can do stuff with a little tiny thing. Again, contesters make good emergency communications operators because they can accurately copy information through QRM and QRN. They know how to do rapid fire exchanges. They've got stations designed for effective communications in adverse conditions. They've got those takeoff angles. Many times they've got multiple antennas per band. Like portable operators, they're technically competent, so if something goes wrong, they can fix it pretty quickly. In a lot of cases, they've got redundancy built into the station or replacement parts right on hand right away. They're dynamic and aggressive. They're focused on getting the goal rather than saying, oh, it's too hard to get this through an emergency. You want people who are focused on getting that information through. So I talked about contact sport. I referenced some slides by Gary Sutcliffe, W9XT, and some contesting tips for little pistols. That's pretty much all I have. Again, it wasn't a how-to contest, but that's some of the things you can get if you really start digging into contesting, and there are thousands and thousands of pages out there. That's pretty much it. Back to y'all.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Well, you've covered an awful lot there. I'm And this is obviously an opportunity for you at home. If you've got any comments about your own experiences with contesting, good or bad, I guess, or has this given you a thought that maybe you can get more from contesting and a slightly different aspect on it instead of just doing it as a contest itself, improving your station, etc. Anyway, any comments or questions that you have, this is the time to send them now, either on BATC or Facebook in the usual way, and we'll certainly relay them to Kevin. Kevin, the question I've got for you really is what do you mostly get from contesting? You clearly do contesting yourself. So what's the most important thing from you? Is it the contest itself and the points and the competitive aspect, or is it because you can improve the station and everything else?
I don't have a single thing that I can give you a single answer. I'll give you a range. First off is it taught me how to be an operator. I've been licensed 25 years before I got into contesting, 45 now. And it really taught me how to essentially be a radio operator. I had no idea about how much was really involved in how to make the station perform and operate. Secondly is, as I said, I'm fascinated by propagation. It still amazes me that I can sit here in South Carolina and talk to you all over there in Europe and not go over the internet like we're doing now. And how to go about making that happen, to be able to work these different places on a routine basis and to see how propagation moves and changes and is affected by small storms or lightning or different things. And the third thing, and probably the most important, is the fellowship. Involved in 3 or 4 different contesting clubs, and people just like to learn and improve, and I enjoy sharing what I've learned. As I said before, it's been a learning process for me as I go through, and I like to share what I've learned with other people. Some operators and hams and contesters they've got almost unlimited resources. Like NQ4I, I mentioned he had 5 towers up to 200 feet, stacked monobanders, 160 meter receive arrays. He had a 80 meter log periodic. He had a 20 meter Yagi, the biggest in North America, that was 89 feet long. And I don't have that. It's just amazing what you can do with a low power station and a small station. And so many people just don't know how to set the station up and make it work that way. I've talked to people around here saying they've had to have amplifiers to work the X, and after they've seen the scores and different awards that I've gotten, they're no longer hesitant to try to get on and work somebody without an amplifier. I share that information.
Well, when you mentioned the sort of fellowship, I mean, when I hear, by the way, I should tell you that in Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, we've got quite a strong contest community, and in fact we've won it for quite a few years now in various, the club championships, the RSGB 80 meter club championships in particular. But when I hear sometimes the other view from people who it doesn't do anything for them, one of the things with criticisms I've heard them say is that they don't get the sense of community, and there's no chance to sit and talk or even chat and say how's the weather or anything, because everybody wants to move on for the next contact, the next point. So I was interested to hear you then just mention about the sense of community and the fellowship.
The difference is, where is the community and fellowship? If you are doing a competition style format, no, you don't get to stop and smell the roses, if you will. Although a lot of times during contest, if a call you recognize comes in, you do dit, or you say, "Hi, John, good to work you," whatever the case may be. The fellowship comes in between contests. We have a very active Swamp Fox contest group. We probably get, sometimes up to 10, 15 messages a day. You have an amazing program that you do here. I'm impressed with it every time I log into you, which doesn't deal directly with contesting, but you have a fellowship with the people and you go back and forth on the air. Besides the Swamp Fox contest group, I'm in the Southeast Contest Club and the Deep Dixie Contest Club, and we exchange information on those bands all the time. Also, we have a get-together in the town. People across the state of South Carolina go down once a year, and we get together, or once a month up at Greenville is another place we go, and we just gravitate to each other and talk and carry on, or we even call each other on the phone. So it's not during the contest that the fellowship is there so much as afterwards. I had a guy, for example, John W4IX, worked in Greenville, and he and I had been at NQ4I, the multi station, superstation, together for a while. He's since moved out to Arizona, yet we still talk back and forth and congratulate each other on how we did and exchange phone calls or information. So that's what I was referring to. No, there's nothing fun about the 5914 or 5905.
Well, I think, you know what, we haven't got any questions from people. I think that's partly because you have covered so much, and also because you might have heard me mention earlier on that tonight is a contest night for our club championship. So I know that 30 or 40 of the people who would normally be watching this are probably getting their last 28 minutes in. But they'll watch this again tomorrow, so don't worry, they won't miss it. But Kevin, I think that's a great way to finish it, actually, saying that's the fellowship of it, the talking in between and the common elements. And hopefully we've encouraged some other people who've just been watching this and not taking part in a contest to have a go. But I think you've given us a lot of great reasons to consider contesting is much more than 5905. So once again, it's been really good to see you, and thank you very much indeed for tonight's talk.
Thank you, sure, and I enjoyed it.
Lovely to see you again. We'll see you again hopefully in the future as well. Kevan N4XL there with our talk tonight. Thank you. And that's almost it for NARC Live tonight. I hope you've enjoyed that. Just to let you know, remind you again what's happening excuse me, this week in the club. On Sunday, we've got the GB2RS News on GB3MB repeater at 7 o'clock. On Monday at 7:30, the Monday Night Net this week with Michael 2E0SZP, and at 8:30, the 80-metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday here on NARC Live, we're calling it In the Shack. It's our series of In the Shack. This week's going to be all about propagation, which of course Kevin's been talking about tonight, and the propagation tools in particular, PropQuest, the way you can use those tools to accurately predict, forecast your own conditions, what aerials to use, what bands are best to use, all of those things. But it's an interactive, so we really do want you there. We want you to ask the questions, and Jim G3YLA will be showing you PropQuest, and of course there are other tools as well. So I hope you join us again next week for NARC Live. But until then, from Tammy M0TC.
Goodbye.
And from me, David G7URP. Thanks for joining us. Good night.